Hello and welcome back to another episode. Today I have Jiraiya with me. Hey Jiraiya, how are you doing?
Hey man, doing real good. How are you? How have you been?
I'm good, I'm good. Glad to have you on.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be on.
Alright, so without further ado, could we jump right into a bit of yourself, like what's your background and of course your crypto origin story?
Yeah, sure. So been in this space since around about 2016, 2017. Mainly sort of operated in this space as a investor and a speculator. Prior to crypto, I did a bit of day trading. So my background, well, I did a degree actually in biology. So I have a degree in biology, studied in London. And then whilst I was doing my degree, I actually learned how to day trade Forex, which is like foreign currencies, which is like a $6 trillion market, or rather $6 trillion of value gets transacted per day through that market. And then through that, I kind of stumbled into crypto because one of my housemates that I was living in back at university, he basically came back and he was really excited. And I was like, why are you so excited? And he said, I just doubled my money. And I'm like, what do you mean you just doubled your money? He was like, yeah, I bought this coin on Coinbase and it just like doubled. And I was like, okay, well, what did you buy? And what is Coinbase? And he told me it was something called Litecoin at the time. It was maybe around about $20, $30. It just doubled because there was a lot of interest in it and in crypto back then. And, I was like, okay, interesting. Sounds a bit like a Ponzi. I'm just going to stay away. And this is me, this is me being ignorant, right? I didn't know anything about crypto. I didn't really hear much about Bitcoin back then. I'm sure it was a thing amongst a certain niche audience, but as a university student, and learning biology, with in a classroom full of other biologists, Bitcoin is not something you talk about, right? So I ignored him, and then a few days later he comes home and he's like, "My God, my money just doubled again," and I'm like, "Okay, this is interesting. Like, how is this happening, right?" So slowly but surely, I got a little bit more interested in it, and I ended up buying some Litecoin, as well as some Ethereum. And then, obviously, as you probably know, you can see in the charts, it just skyrocketed. And I made like maybe a 2, 3x. It wasn't like anything enormous, but made a nice little return on it. And then I also bought into Ripple back during the hype, when that skyrocketed and basically round tripped everything. So yeah, needless to say, the beginning of my journey was extremely successful. No sarcasm included. Um, but yeah, so fast forward till today, mainly kind of operate in a space as like an influencer, a KOL, I guess. Um, and also, co-founded a protocol and also co-founded a full stack Web3 agency as well. We service, various different DeFi protocols out there.
Nice. I mean, I'm not sure what's with the number of people in science backgrounds doing in crypto. There's so many of you guys.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I think this space does attract a certain crowd of people. I mean, I've been to like a few events this year for the first time, and met some crypto bros in real life, including yourself, right? And generally speaking, out of the majority of people that I met, there is like a certain sort of philosophy or outlook on life, and that is how they kind of ended up in the space that they are in today, right? That's why they spend a lot of time here, because there's certain things about the space that aligns with their core values, their relationship with money, their relationship with work, the relationship with the world. So yeah, I think that might be a factor potentially.
Yeah, totally. And like you mentioned earlier, right? Buying, hearing about crypto and all when you were back in university and buying Litecoin. I think this was what year was this in then? Like 2019,
Around
2020?
about 2017, I think. Yeah. Oh no, wait, let me have a think. No, yeah, no, it'll be closer to 2019. Like, I need to count back a few years. So in 2023, four, no, around, yeah, yeah, around about 2016, 2017 was generally when I got involved in the space. Maybe it was 2018. I can't remember actually.
Nice,
Yeah, it's been a
nice.
while.
No, I didn't know like you were involved so early, man. Like I mean, we've met, you look pretty young, so I didn't know.
Mm, yeah, yeah. I mean, I was very young back then. I think I first heard about it and bought it maybe when I was like 19, 20 years old. So right now I'm 26. right? Going to 27 next year. So yeah, definitely young, not old. I wouldn't consider myself old.
All right, nice. And the next thing I want to talk about, right, is like, of course, I've seen your Twitter and you've been doing a lot of bull posting on Rune. So could we get you to share a little bit about your Rune thesis?
Yeah, so very high level explanation of Rune, or rather thought. So Rune is the tick up, and Thorchain is the sort of project, right? It's basically like I'm not the most technical person, so for all of you Rune maxis out there that might be listening and saying, "Oh, you got this a little bit wrong." I don't care, right? I know the general gist of it and I have a thesis, and if I got some very small technical element wrong, I'm sorry, right? If it offends you. But very high level about Rune is that it's first and foremost an exchange, right? So you can think of it almost like Uniswap or Camelot or Trader Joe in that sense. What's different about it is that unlike these sort of exchanges that facilitates swaps and exchange of tokens between long tail assets, Rune only facilitates swaps between native layer ones. So what that basically means is that you can swap native Bitcoin for native Ethereum. Now, obviously, the reason why this is revolutionary, or it might not be so obvious to a lot of people, is that when let's say you're on Ethereum, or let's say you're on Arbitrum or on Avalanche, and you swap some USDC or wrapped Ethereum or whatever it may be into Bitcoin, right? What you're holding is not actually real Bitcoin, right? It's a wrapped derivative of Bitcoin, right? It's WBTC. So obviously, with every sort of wrapped asset, right, it comes with a certain set of trust assumptions, and it also comes with a certain level of risk. And assuming, or rather, if on the off chance, a specific bridge was to be exploited, it would basically mean that you wouldn't be able to redeem the redeem your asset on the other side, right? Meaning that you can lose a lot of money, right? It's a sort of TLDR of kind of wrapped assets. And I think this has kind of been highlighted in the case over the last few years, when Wormhole got exploited, when multi-chain got exploited, and all these different bridges, Ronin bridge I think got exploited as well, right? And if you look at like the number one loss of funds across like DeFi as a whole, a lot of it is obviously lost, from like money markets because they found some sort of exploit, but the vast majority of it really comes from people hacking bridges, right, and siphoning a lot of funds out of that. So the reason why Rune is innovative in that sense is that it doesn't deal with wrapped assets. It deals strictly with the native assets on each chain, meaning that when you swap your Ethereum to Bitcoin, you are holding real Bitcoin. It's not a wrapped derivative of it, right? Um, so that's kind of the very high level of it. And yeah, I mean, in terms of the bull thesis, I can definitely go on for quite some time. But if you guys take the time to kind of dive into their tokenomic structure, you'll basically see that they've built a security model that ensures that for every $1 of non-native asset that is added as an LP on as a liquidity pool, right? Around about $2 to $3 of Rune will be added alongside that to basically secure the underlying economic value that resides in the chain. So yeah, for $100 of Rune that is added to the LP, $100 will be added towards the LP as well, obviously in a 50-50 sort of split, as with many sort of AMMs. And on top of that, another $100 would be added to via the node operators to basically ensure economic security. So the reason why they have this sort of structure is to ensure that node operators would never be incentivized to collude to siphon funds from the ecosystem, because the value of the bond that they put up is greater than the dollar value of the assets that it secures. So if, let's say, they were to collude and they were to like steal, I don't know, $1 million worth of Ethereum, they would be losing, way like more than $1 million from their own bond, from their own personal portfolio, or the value of their position, let's say. So, because it's a negative EV move, this does discourage collusion. But really, the main bull thesis of it is that there is flywheel that they have created that is built around LPs, volume, and obviously this kind of economic structure that I just described above. So because of this sort of model, there is a deterministic floor that is created when it comes to rune pricing, which is basically its market cap is always going to be 3 times its TVL, right? Giving rune a deterministic floor pricing, right? So assuming that no one removes funds from the LP, right? There is going to be a certain price floor that rune will definitely hold based on a certain set of economic factors, right? And unlike many sort of tokenomic models out there, it doesn't really sort of create like there is no, at least to my understanding, there are very few tokenomic models that can ensure and guarantee this price floor as like a hard floor, right? So that's something that's pretty interesting about it. And the most important thing is that it really kind of scales with TVL, right? So imagine if one day it captures, let's say, 0.5% of the total circulating supply of Bitcoin, and maybe 0.5% of the total circulating supply of Ethereum, as and capture it as like LPs in the pool, right? The price of Rune would definitely skyrocket. And it wouldn't be based on speculation alone, it would be based on basically cold hard math, right? So I think that's a pretty interesting model, all in all. And as an investor, that allows you to build that sort of set of trust assumptions into your thesis, and therefore it can limit the the sort of exposure and loss that you could potentially incur in your portfolio on any sort of volatile swing to the downside. So yeah, there's a lot more reasons than that, but I think that's the high level. And yeah.
My follow-up question would then be, since you mentioned if the Thorchain ecosystem kind of scales up and captures more market share, it will greatly benefit it, right? And how do you see it scaling up and capturing more of that market share?
Yeah, so right now, the way that I see Rune is that it's basically trying to compete with centralized exchanges, right? Because on some swaps lately, I don't know the exact depth of all of the pools, but there are some like Bitcoin, Ethereum, USDC swaps, right? And you can there's a Telegram bot that shows you like the estimated savings versus trading that same route via a centralized exchange. So it's pretty interesting, right? Chain there's an on-chain exchange that allows you to conduct the same sort of exchange that you would be able to conduct on a centralized exchange, but on-chain in a permissionless way, with having full custody of your funds at all times, and saving money during that process. I think that in itself is pretty innovative. And number two, they are trying to capture more of the market share by actually, instead of pumping loads of money into like influencer marketing or pumping money into press releases and all of this stuff that a lot of protocols do, right? These guys are more focused on the B2B route, so they are pumping money into business development, right? They're basically saying to people, look, if you can connect us and get us integrated into various different wallets, we will basically pay you a sum of $20,000 or $100,000 or whatever it may be, right? And I think that's a much more effective way to go around it, because Thorchain in itself is actually it's like a faceless protocol. All it is basically a back end, right? And all these different wallets like Trust Wallet, like Ledger, MetaMask, Shapeshift, ThorSwap, all of these wallets and exchange or like sort of front ends. They are basically they basically act as the one of many front ends for Thorchain, which I think is pretty interesting as well, because the way that I see the future when it comes to like the next wave of normal people onto crypto, I don't think they're gonna go from centralized exchange to a decentralized self-custodial wallet and then understand that, okay, I need to go to Uniswap to make this swap for Ethereum. I need to go to, I don't know, like Trader Joe if I want to swap something on Avalanche. I need to go to Camelot if I want to swap something on Arbitrum. I personally think that is all going to be abstracted away. And I believe that most people that get onboarded to the wallet, they're going to see the swap function, like the swap button, right, built into the wallet, and they're going to click, whatever asset that they have, and they're going to click, whatever asset it is that they want, and they will just hit, approve and swap and all of that. And that's all there is. That's all there is to it, right? And obviously, in a back end, it would route it through these dexes, but I don't think it's going to be people remembering names of decentralized exchanges for like every single different blockchain out there. I think a lot of this is going to be abstracted away, through wallets. And Thorchain has been shipping pretty hard. They've been integrated with Ledger. They've been integrated with Trust Wallet, MetaMask via Shapeshift. A lot of different wallets out there. And yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right, for these wallets to do it because they can basically facilitate the same swaps but at a much cheaper rate due to an innovation that Thorchain made called streaming swaps, which is basically breaking up a large transaction and breaking it down so that this transaction takes place over various different blocks. So although it wouldn't be instantaneous, like imagine you go to Camelot, or you go to, I don't know, some sort of DEX on Arbitrum, right? And you make a swap on Arbitrum, it's pretty much instantaneous, right? You put in your Ethereum, it spits out the USDC in like a split second. Now, if you were to do a much larger transaction, right, one that is, let's say, a $10 million transaction against a $12 million pool, you're going to get a lot of slippage trying to transact that, on any of these exchanges, on Arbitrum, Ethereum, whatever it may be. But with the streaming swap innovation that Thorchain has made, they basically break that transaction down over several different blocks. So it takes place maybe over an hour, maybe takes place over 30 minutes. It depends on the size of the transaction relative to the pool size. But what they can achieve is 5 bips of price of spread, which is basically like what 0.05% spread on transactions, on large transactions, mind you. And the coolest thing, right, and I have to tell you this news because you need to buy Thorchain after this, man, I'm telling you, they managed to facilitate a $6 million swap on a $5 million pool.
What?
Think about that for a second. Yeah, right. What is the question, right? How can you facilitate a $6 million swap in a pool that is actually smaller than the size of the transaction without facing insane levels of slippage? They managed to execute that. I think, don't quote me on this, but I think is around about 0.5% slippage, which isn't the tightest, but it's better than 100%, right? I mean, if you try to ape any sort of shitcoin with 50K liquidity and you try and buy 60K worth of it, you're gonna face a lot of slippage, right? So 0.5% is obviously a much better price to pay. But yeah, through this innovation, that is what they managed to facilitate. And obviously, the sort of minor setback here is that in order to get this amazing price execution, it does require the user to wait a bit of time, right? It might take they might have to wait 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and obviously people want things in crypto and they want it now, right? So the next innovation that they're gonna
Yeah.
make is called I think it's called like streaming blocks or rapid blocks. Don't quote me on the name, but the TLDR of it is that they will basically be able to facilitate these very, very low slippage, low spread executions, right? But in a single block. So it would basically be as fast or as seamless as transacting on any DEX, but you would be able to handle way more size on a smaller liquidity pool. So it's because of all of these things that have been taking place, which is why Thorchain has, I think facilitated $8 billion of swaps in volume over the month of November, putting them, I think, third on the map, just ahead of Curve, which ironically, trades, I think, I'm not sure if it trades at a higher valuation, but I know the TVL in Curve is around about 10 times higher than the TVL on Thorchain, yet they managed to facilitate, more volume. So you can imagine that the LPs are just like, going nuts right now. My LP position is, yeah, it's earning around about 250% APR in that position. So pretty happy with it. I think I put in like a 50K LP and it spat out around about 5K in rewards over this last month. So pretty insane.
Wow, nice. And you're like hyping me up already, man.
Yeah, I mean, all I can say is, don't trust me my word for it. Go and do your research, see if it fits your risk profile. It has, pumped up a little bit now, but in my opinion, it's one of the few coins that has the potential to go from where it is right now to another 50x conservatively. Because again, it's one of the few protocols out there that actually scales alongside the growth of the price appreciation of like Bitcoin, of Ethereum, all of these assets, right? Because you know if let's say Bitcoin doubles in value, right, the transactional volume that is taking place through Thorchain would now be double in terms of like dollars, right? Therefore, the LPs would be like eating a lot heavier, right? They'll be feasting a lot more, let's say, and that would naturally draw in more people to take an interest to buying up room and providing LP, and every LP essentially creates some sort of buy pressure on the room side as well. So yeah, there's a lot of cool things. I'm probably not the best person to explain it to someone who's hearing about this for the first time, but hey man, it's my first time. I'm doing my best.
I mean, just for some context, I just checked, right? So the price of the Rune token right now is somewhere in the $6 range, right? Just in case, I don't know what's gonna happen in this period. By the time the episode comes out, it could be a totally different number. So just keep that in mind,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it could be zero. Yeah, it could be zero, guys. It could be zero. And this is why it's not financial advice. But
No,
yeah,
or it
all
could
I
be
can
like
say is that
$10 by the time this comes out. I don't know.
yeah, it's true. It's actually funny because I found out about Thorchain through reading one of the Mizari reports, Mizari
Mm-hmm.
Crypto, right? They released like an annual report and it basically showed like some of the top wallets. And basically, we look at all of that, like all of these sort of smart wallets or these wallets that they analyze, all of them have like at least a 10% allocation or 8 to 10% allocation in their portfolio group, which really kind of got me interested. I was like, wait, why is everyone holding? Okay, I can understand why people are holding Bitcoin, why people are holding Ethereum, but why are they holding Rune and what is Rune? Right. So that's kind of how I learned about it through Mazari.
Right, awesome. And of course, I see that you're a huge supporter of the Avalanche ecosystem as well. What's your take on it, man? Like, I know, like right now, all eyes are on Solana. I mean, of course, Avalanche has gotten some traction as well, right, recently. But what's your take on it?
I think the chain itself has some pretty strong narratives going for it. Obviously, it's kind of centered around two things right now. Number one, the tokenization of real world assets, which I believe is a huge market to
Mm-hmm.
capitalize on. And the second one being gaming. Honestly, I haven't played all of the games, but I've seen some clips of gameplay, like on Shrapnel, for example. And, it really kind of like it depends on how well they market it and position it and kind of go to market with it with the greater gaming audience that resides out there. But the world has a lot of gamers. The world has a lot of assets that are off chain that can be tokenized. So if they can realize their vision and bring a portion of that on chain, even if it's like 1%, we're talking about a lot of growth here. So personally, I'm excited about it. Would I say it's the best price to buy it now? Honestly, I have no idea. Like, if it was me, I would, probably consider it a part of my portfolio, and yeah, I would just, kind of DCA into it. Let's say, upwards or downwards.
Right, but like, besides, how should I put this? Like, any particular projects that you're looking at in particular?
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely a few. I mean, there's quite a few innovative projects that are going to be launching there. One of them is called Lever, is LEVR. My agency that I founded is actually helping with some of the UX UI on that front, as well as the light paper. But the TLDR of it, without kind of giving too much away, is that it's basically going to be a leveraged sports betting platform that leverages a similar mechanic to GMX, but for sports bets, which I think is going to be pretty interesting. It's something innovative that the space hasn't seen before yet. And again, just like with real world asset tokenization and gaming, there's a huge market when it comes to sports betting out there. So if you can capture a percentage of that and offer leverage on top, I think it's a degenerate's haven, let's say. So I think that's a pretty interesting project. And yeah, there are definitely a lot of other cool stuff, such as like Struct Finance, for example, which is kind of bringing structured products on chain,
Mm-hmm.
which traditionally normal people, like normal people being like kind of you and I, right, that are just sort of retail fish, we wouldn't have access to these sort of structured products. In day-to-day life, right? Like you can't go up to a bank and access something like this, or go up to a broker and access something like this. So I think what they're doing there is pretty cool as well. They've got integrations there with GMX and also with Trader Joe with their auto pools. So yeah, definitely some interesting things cooking up there, and may or may not be an airdrop, and there may or may not be a token. And yeah, yeah, I think those two are pretty interesting. What else? Um, what else is interesting in this space? Mm, I would definitely say that. Hmm, I don't even think. I definitely say that what VNX is doing is also pretty interesting. So VNX is basically bringing a tokenized version, or rather they're tokenizing the Swiss franc and they're tokenizing the euro, so that it's kind of like basically like USDC, right? So you obviously have USDC, which is like sort of a like tokenized US dollar. They're also doing the same for the Swiss franc, for the euro, as well as gold, which I think would definitely be very very interesting as well, especially if you're a foreign exchange trader and you have some belief that over the long term, the value of the euro, the value of the Swiss franc might outperform the dollar. It's a way for you to kind of get exposed to that, but on chain basically, because until now, I believe you can pretty much only get exposure to USDC or US dollar on chain. So
Nice, like super interesting. I mean, I do think there's a lot going on in Avex right now, like especially with the recent craze around Solana. I've been thinking where would the next rotation be when it happens or if it happens, right? So yeah, I think Avalanche
yeah,
definitely has some things for us to look into as well. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. And there's actually another one now that I remember. INX, that's Indigo November X-ray INX. They recently went live, I think, like literally 2 days ago, and they basically allow you to kind of get exposure to like stocks like SpaceX, Microsoft. I'm not sure Microsoft, but I know that SpaceX, Tesla are things that you can get access to and exposure to on chain as well. So what they got cooking up there is also pretty cool. And obviously, they had the recent announcements with the collaboration with JP Morgan's and Onyx
Mm-hmm.
and the Singaporean like authority for like money. Probably named it wrong, but mass, right?
Yeah,
Um,
MAS.
and they also got some pretty MAS, right? And yeah, in a couple of weeks' time, they got some pretty big announcements coming out as well. So all in all, very excited for the future of it. And yeah, I definitely think it'll be one of the layer ones that definitely will thrive into the future.
Yeah, man. Can't wait for like personally, can't wait for Avalanche to catch up with Solana. It's like the
Yeah,
Solana, Luna, Avex all again, but I don't know if Luna's gonna be involved this time round.
yeah. And this is the thing, like you bring up a very interesting point here, right? Is that you as an individual, you're excited about Solana, you're excited about Ethereum, I guess, right? About Avalanche, about Polygon, maybe, about all these different sort of layer ones, right? And just kind of circling back to the whole Rune thesis here, is that when you're betting on Rune, what you're really sort of betting on is not the success of a single chain or a single ecosystem. Rather, you're betting on the success of a multi-chain future, right? Where there'll be
Mm-hmm.
several different layer ones that exist for various different reasons, right? So I think that also kind of ties into the overall root thesis. Like I do believe that all these layer ones will continue to thrive, and innovations will continue to take place, and that is also why I think Rune will exist and thrive along.
Sorry, I think you got cut off there.
Ah, yeah, and I was just saying that because you believe because you probably have belief that all of these other layer ones like Polygon, Solana, Avalanche, that these will all thrive in that sort of future, right? That is also one of the reasons as to why I believe Rune will thrive as well. As long as various layer ones exist, there will be people that want to transact value and make these swaps across these different layers and not want to expose themselves to the risk that comes with wrapped assets, which kind of ties into the overall thesis as well. And betting on a multi-chain future, essentially.
Yep, nice. Super excited. Gonna see how it goes on. But yeah. And now actually I want to understand a bit more about yourself. So like since you mentioned earlier that you were doing the LPs on Thorchain, right? Like are you more of a farmer yourself or like you used to do forex trading, so like do you still trade actively or like what's your style, man?
Yeah, so I trade actively. Just more like most of my sort of day trading is centered around the foreign exchange market. So I predominantly trade euro dollar and pound dollar, to be honest with you. When it comes to like on-chain trading, I mean, I wouldn't call myself a trader in a sense. Like, I have spot holdings, I buy them and I hold them and I sell them, right? Does that constitute as a trader? Well, depends on how you define it, I guess, right? I personally classify that style more closer to sort of long-term investing, right? But it depends on how you want to classify it. You can classify it as like a position-based trader as well if you want to. So yeah, my style is more sort of buying, holding, accumulating, and potentially, leveraging up as well, but not via like a centralized exchange or not via a dex per se, but via like a money market. So let's say, for example, I want to get exposure to or let's say I want to short something actually. All right. A lot of people when it comes to shorting, right, they would think about, okay, I would go to KuCoin, I'll go to Binance and open up a short position. Or if they're like on-chain degens, they might go to GMX or Mux Protocol and open up a short position, right? But there's actually another way of shorting, and that is by leveraging money markets. So what you can do is you can actually supply USDC, you can borrow Ethereum, and then with that borrowed Ethereum, you basically sell it back into USDC, and then you can resupply that as collateral. Now, because with traditional money markets, the debt is denominated in the sort of token that you borrow, right? In this case, you're borrowing Ethereum. If let's say Ethereum, you borrow Ethereum and it's at $2,000, you sell it to USDC, that's $2,000 that you resupply as collateral. Assuming that Ethereum drops from 2,000 down to, let's say, capo level predictions of $1,000 or whatever, right? You now you now have to pay back one Ethereum, but that one Ethereum that you have to pay back is actually worth $1,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the net gain you would have made is actually plus $1,000 for borrowing Ethereum, which I think is, I mean, it's pretty simple, but it's an easy way to kind of short something without having to pay extortionate fees, in my opinion.
Yep,
Um,
and
yeah.
maybe just have to take note. Maybe just have to take note of the borrowing and lending rates as well. But generally the strategy is there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And with respect to where to find like good borrowing or borrowing and lending rates, you can always go to like DeFi Llama. You can put in like what you want to lend, what you want to borrow, and then it'll basically spit out all of the different APRs and APYs of borrowing and lending on various different platforms. And if you're lucky, let's say, or if that platform has incentives, like with Avalanche, there was incentives around Aave for a period of time, you can actually get paid to hold that short position, which is pretty cool, in my opinion.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, thanks for sharing that strategy, man.
You're welcome. Now, don't take all my liquidity, thanks.
All right. You mentioned that you're kind of a trader, but I mean more of a forex, right? And of course, you've been in this market for quite a few years now. What's your take on the markets in general for the next coming year?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when it comes to like day trading, right? As a day trader, you're very sort of more short-term orientated. It's more about your beliefs about price appreciation or depreciation on any given day, as opposed to any given quarter or every given year. But I can give you, I'll be able to give you a much more accurate level of analysis when it comes to forex. I'll do my best for crypto. I think generally we are in a pretty good position, right? And by that, what I mean is that this bear market, I mean, I don't know if you classify it as a bear market now or a bull market, whatever it is, right? But in this kind of current market, or even in the bear market that preceded this, right? From 12 months ago, it was a very sort of different situation fundamentally from like the last bear market, because during the last bear market, like DeFi wasn't a thing, right? Like it was really just a case of buying and holding. Like staking wasn't even a thing back then, right? It only came about a little bit later on.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot more innovation going on. There's a lot more activity going on. There's a lot of builders that are building genuine things that can add value to the financial world that we live and operate and thrive in today, right? So because of this, although I can't see like how positive or how negative the impact will be over the next year or over the next quarter. What I do believe is that there is a lot of value that is being created through these applications on chain that replaces a lot of financial products that do exist in the ecosystem, like the financial ecosystem that in Web 2, I'd say, right? So for this reason, assuming that regulations and stuff doesn't completely hammer down on DeFi protocols and decentralization and completely kind of regulate that side of things, assuming that there is still that sort of sovereignty, that it's likely that we're going to have a positive future. So personally, I'm bullish in the market. But at the same time, I do have stables allocated on the side, and yeah, I am ready to deploy if we get another dip lower, even below the local lows that were made last year. So
Nice. Are you able to share like a percentage, a number, of your stables right now?
10% stables,
I mean
10%
that's fair, right?
stables.
So
Yeah, yeah, I'd say that's fair.
do you like usually hold? I mean, since you mentioned you plan to um deploy it if it goes down lower, like do you usually have a certain percentage of stables to be holding most of the time?
Yeah, generally. So yeah, I generally keep around about 10% of like the overall portfolio in stables, just to obviously have that dry powder. And there's a lot more deal flow going around the ecosystem right now. So there's a lot of like seed opportunities, private round opportunities. Recently, I participated in the Curvance seed round. This was led by much larger players than myself. It was led by like the founder of Polygon,
Mm-hmm.
the guys from Off Chain Labs, from Redacted Cartel, from Frax, Alchemix, a lot of these sort of bigger players. Fortunately, I had an allocation, and it was fortunate also that I had stables right on the side as dry powder to deploy into such an opportunity when it came around. So yeah, I would personally always keep some at hand, even if we're in a full blown bull market, right? Like always have some at hand, just so you can be agile, because crypto is a very dynamic environment, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
imagine you go on a holiday over the weekend and then the whole landscape changes.
I mean, for you, I don't know, you travel everywhere with like your keys and all, right? But maybe for some people, imagine you're on a holiday and then the whole thing crashes, like FTX did that time, and then you have no access. Like, what are you gonna do, man?
Yeah, that's true. And that's always a risk, but that's why, right? You just got to remember your seed phrase. Right? You got to remember your seed phrase. Keep a spare ledger at hand. Yeah, I mean, going back to the point, right? You mentioned that I'm traveling around. Obviously, I travel around with my hard wallets, but I also have like a backup hard wallet in case I lose it, in case I don't know I lose it like on some boat accident or whatever it is, right? I always have like a spare one to basically recover the funds. So
Mm-hmm. No, actually, I wanted to cover a little bit on Curvance, right? Since you mentioned it, maybe for those who are not as familiar with it, do you wanna go a little bit into what it is about?
a very sort of high level explanation is that they're an on-chain CDP protocol. I mean, what I'm going to explain now is not limited. Is not like everything. It's not going to cover like every aspect of what they do. It's just going to be one aspect, right? So if you look at like the LPs on Curve, the LPs on Velodrome, the LPs on Balancer, all of these, big dexes, right? Oftentimes, the sort of main way in which you accrue value is obviously through emissions and through the fees generated from swaps, right? From farming itself. Um, so what Curvance will enable you to do is that will allow you to basically take a line of credit or collateralize these LP positions and take a loan out against it. And obviously that opens up, increases capital efficiency, opens up some capital for you to redeploy into other things that you want to deploy into, right? Without having to break apart your LP position, whilst enabling it to accrue fees and whatnot. And one thing in particular, again, if I'm not 100% accurate in this, I do apologize, but from my understanding, is that when you want to execute, let's say a vote, like you want to execute a vote, right, like a vote transaction on Ethereum. Let's say you hold some VE curve and you want to vote for a specific gauge. It's going to cost you what I believe is an arm and a leg. It's going to cost you like $20, $50, depending on gas prices at the time, to make that sort of transaction, to execute that call transaction. But what Curvance will allow you to do is that it will allow you to actually, like, again, not 100% of it is technically correct, but it will basically allow you to call the transaction via like Arbitrum and through like the wormhole messaging side of things, to basically like vote on Ethereum, but paying the prices on Arbitrum, if that kind of makes sense. There's definitely a better and more elegant way to word it. And I'm sure Michael and Mai, who are the co-founders of Curvance, will be able to explain it a bit better. But that's sort of the TLDR. And yeah, they're tapping into a lot of different verticals as well. They're tapping into the whole LSD narrative. They've got very stacked partnerships with like Pendle as well, with Velodrome, with Mux Protocol, Scroll, ZK Sync, Polygon, like a bunch of layer ones, bunch of layer twos. So yeah, in terms of like the cap table, in my opinion, out of all of the recent protocols that I've raised, they are by far the most stacked in terms of partnerships and strategic investors. So for that reason, very, very excited for the future there.
Nice, awesome. And now, like, I kind of want to know a little bit more about yourself. Um, could you run us through a day in the life of Jiraiya?
Yeah. Wow, that's such a good question, but such a hard question. So to give some
Why is that?
context, so to give some context, I'm basically traveling, right? And I'm not traveling for like 1 or 2 months in Asia. I've been traveling for about just under 2 years. So I've been on the move from country to country. Spent 3 months in Thailand, 3 months in Malaysia, 3 months in Singapore, and Indonesia, Japan, Taiwan, Vietnam, like a load of different countries, right? And whilst I'm in these countries, I'm also moving around different cities. So a day is usually very sporadic. There's a lot of different things going on. I'm either on a boat, in a car, in a van, on a plane. Like I'm usually moving around somewhere, right? And whilst I'm in that city, there's a lot of things to be doing, right? Places to see, people to be with, I guess, right? So, you know, obviously, you know, factoring this into my trading life is already, one aspect that is quite difficult. But when you add on top, being kind of full time in Web3, building an agency, servicing, various different protocols, servicing Avalanche, Curvance, all of these different protocols, it is quite a lot, right? So my day is quite sporadic with the TLDR. A general structure would be like waking up probably around about 10 or 11. So I wake quite late in the day, but I also work quite weird hours as well. So I'd wake up, usually, ideally go to the gym. Yeah, go to the gym for like an hour, 2 hours, but close to an hour. Okay, close to an hour. And then I'll come back, have back-to-back meetings. Usually, it's either calls with clients or calls with potential clients, calls with the team, and then that can obviously lead into a lot of like Discord communication, Telegram chats. Yeah, so my Discord and my Telegram is a mess. If I don't pay attention to it for like, let's say 3 hours or even 2 hours, I have like 20, 30, 40 unread inboxes from like various different people. Because, as I said, I run an agency and it's a pretty big operation. We have a division dedicated towards development, which is like front end, back end, smart contract engineering. The team dedicated towards like content, which is like, tweets, threads, medium articles that we write for protocols. Myself personally, I'm on like the marketing side of things. So it's like influencer marketing, newsletter marketing, press releases. So working with people from like Cointelegraph, CoinMarketCap, Defiant, Binance, all of these different parties. And on top of that, we also have a design division, right? So, there's a lot of different departments to be coordinating between for every client. There's a lot of different clients that have different needs, a lot of different group chats. So, a lot of the time is really sort of spent coordinating with these guys to make sure everything, works as intended and that the service that we deliver is always of the highest quality, because customer satisfaction is really our number one priority. I know it sounds very cliche, but for us, we would always, prioritize, one smaller client being really, really happy than trying to, make a ton of money by, going after 10 clients, for example. That's just our modus, like a way of operating. So yeah, so that usually takes up the majority of the day. I usually have lunch around about 4, 5 o'clock, which is also
Wow.
the first meal of my day. Yeah, the first meal of my day. And then after that, I go back to working for a few hours. I might train New York session because in Asia, New York is around about 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock p.m. Here in Thailand time anyway. So there'll be some trading, some calls back, some calls that I have to take, and then yeah, my day usually wraps up around about 10, 11 o'clock where I have dinner, and then I just kind of chill for like the last 2 hours, and then it's kind of rinse and repeat from there. But obviously, factor in, whilst I'm on the move, I will be, definitely spending a lot of the time, visiting places, going scuba diving, going snorkeling, going to see elephants, temples, castles, whatever. Um, and yeah, during these times, I try to like limit my Calendly so that people can only schedule meetings during certain hours. That way, I have a lot more predictive in my day, so I can kind of fit everything in whilst having fun and ensuring that we're delivering high quality services to people at a timely manner without having people to wait and stuff like that.
Nice. Actually, just curious question. Like, since you're moving from different countries and you're staying multiple months at a time, do you usually book like an Airbnb for the whole period, or how do you guys settle accommodation?
Yeah, yeah. So we actually like found a really nice location in Chiang Mai. So Chiang Mai is a city in the north of Thailand. It's a place where I usually spend maybe 3 months at a time, and during that time period, there would be very little traveling. It's literally maybe just on weekends we might fly out somewhere, but predominantly like the 3 months would be spent there just doing concentrated work, really sort of trying to scale or scale my trading to get to the next level, let's say. Um, so for that specific place, we would book 3 months at a time, and it's actually quite cheap. Like the place that we got is really, really nice. Got like 100 meter long swimming pool, private gym, cleaning, everything, and it's around about $350 a month. So really, really affordable. Especially if you're coming from the states, or you come like me coming from the UK, where the cost of living rent is maybe like £1,000, maybe 1,500 depending on where you live, right? Like scaling that all the way down to $350 whilst having much more amenities in the form of like a swimming pool, cleaning, etc., is honestly a huge plus. And just knowing that you're spending less, but you're also having like all your food cooked. Like you don't have to spend time thinking what should I cook, or should I wash my clothes today, or should I clean my house today. Like, all of that is basically taken care of, so that you can spend the hours of your day being as productive as possible instead of doing what I personally consider more sort of trivial things, right? But
Mm-hmm.
for some people, it's a passion, right? Some people enjoy cooking. So, if you're a chef and you enjoy cooking, obviously it's not trivial for you; it's your passion. So, highly respect that. But for me, I just don't enjoy cooking. I don't think it's a productive use of my time. Hence, why I classify it as trivial for me.
All right, got it. And I mean, since you have a really rich experience here, right? What is one piece of advice you would give your younger self? Like, I mean, you started pretty early already, right? And you're still young, but what is one piece of advice that you would give your younger self?
The piece of advice I'd give my younger self: you should have bought a shit ton of pudgies at 40. Yeah, man. I bought like a couple pudgies back around like 40, and I managed to sell a couple of them off last night for 11, which was a pretty
Nice.
decent exit, right? Considering the price of ETH back when I bought it was maybe like 1,500. Is obviously appreciated like $800 since then, and
Mm-hmm.
obviously sold it for more ETH, right? So that was a great play in retrospect. But me being me, I don't have the best track record when it comes to NFTs. I haven't really been all that successful, and honestly, I'm not. I'm more in the DeFi space as opposed to NFTs. So I just didn't want to overexpose myself on something that I wasn't super knowledgeable on, let's say. But in hindsight, I wish I bought more pudgies. But in terms of like genuinely good advice, I would give myself, um, I would say I would say to myself to be a little bit more conservative and to have made this move to Asia a little bit sooner, because really, making this move makes a huge difference, right? Like as I said, personally lived in the UK. I was raised in the UK. I lived in London. I studied in London. I studied at Imperial College, actually, Imperial College London. And the cost of living there is quite high, right? Like when we're talking about rent, it's maybe about £1,200. In dollars, it'd be maybe about 1,400, 1,500, give or take. And then if you add on like travel costs, if you add on food, entertainment, we're looking at maybe another 800 to 1,000, conservatively, let's say, right? You can obviously, be a more conservative, but that's a ballpark, right? So you're spending maybe around about 2,500, or I was maybe spending about 2,500 on month-to-month basis, and that is being conservative. Over here in Asia, where I've been living and like just kind of moving around different places, my general monthly expense has probably been cut down from 2,500 pounds, closer to $3,000, right? All the way down to maybe about 1,500, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
basically decreased my cost of living by about 50%. But in exchange, I've obviously, number one, got an extra 1,500 to invest into crypto. And assuming in an average bull market, you can 10x your portfolio conservatively. That's, for every $1 you save, you're, really kind of gaining or saving $10, right? So if you can save 1,500 every month, that could easily be 15,000 in the future, right? Over a year, that becomes, well over $150,000, right? So, and that's, conservative figure. And on top of that, with the $1,500 in Asia, the value for money that you get in a place like this is really tremendously higher. You can live like a king. You can have your own private residency. You can have, it's a secured premise with like, guards that look after the place 24/7. Usually covers electricity, gas, heating. Well, you don't need heating actually because it's fucking hot
It's
here in
so hot,
Asia.
yeah.
Pardon, yeah,
Yeah.
it's so hot, man. Yeah, you need AC, right? But yeah, you can have all of that. You can have a swimming pool. You can have daily cleaning, so you don't need to think about cleaning your house. And I believe that a cluttered space is a cluttered mind, right? So I like to personally have things organized. I don't want things everywhere. And once you're traveling, it can be like that, right? Like even if you're not a messy person, it can be like that. So having that cleaning is always helpful. Eating out, very inexpensive. Maybe like if you eat at a fancy restaurant here, you might be looking at $10, $15, right? Like a decent restaurant. Over in the UK, you're probably paying maybe like 45, 50, maybe even 100 for one person. So the point is that money really goes a long way, much further here. If you're thinking that this is like some highly undeveloped third world country you're visiting, you couldn't be more wrong. Like the I mean, the infrastructure here is great. Healthcare, everything is great. Very, very safe. Very low levels of crime, at least in the countries that I've been to. Very friendly people. Very minimal language barrier. Like you can really get around just by using very basic English. Bit of Google Translate, maybe here and there. But yeah, like what you're used to in the West, you can pretty much get here in Asia at a much cheaper cost, and every dollar just stretches so much further. And every dollar saved can be $10 in a bull market. So, if I tell myself something, is make that move sooner, man. Make that move sooner.
Nice, nice. Right then, I mean, we're gonna wrap up with the last two questions here, right? If the first one being, what is your greatest takeaway from crypto?
My greatest takeaway from crypto. Hmm. My greatest takeaway from crypto. I guess the greatest takeaway from crypto is really sort of having like custody over your funds. Right? I know it sounds very cliche and everything, with people saying, "Oh yeah, you have sovereignty over your wealth," blah 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 blah. But until you live in a place or a country where you go to your bank account and you try and take out, what I don't like, not that much money, right? Let's say you're trying to withdraw, I don't know, two, three, four, 5,000 pounds in cash, right? I mean, it's definitely a sizable amount, right? It's a respectable amount, but we're not talking about millions here. Okay, we're talking about something that you would spend over a month. Like in some countries, right, in the UK, for example, they can make that quite difficult for you, right? They'll be asking you a lot of questions. They'll be asking for proof of the proof of wealth or like the source of income, all of these different things. and I understand why that's valuable, right? Because obviously that money was made through money laundering or drugs or whatever it is. Obviously it's not a great thing for the economy as a whole, right? But a lot of it, is just really normal people wanting to take money out for day-to-day services, right? And that is a right, in my opinion, right? It's a right, it's not a privilege. It's something that everyone should have access to. And the fact that with crypto, you really can, pay with a lot of, day-to-day goods and services very easy nowadays. So here's a bit of alpha for people that don't know about this. But there's a website called Bitrefill. So that's BIT refill, REFILL. And basically, you can get access to like Airbnb vouchers, Grab, Uber, Skyscanner, like Twitch, like loads of different things, right? Even um, like energy providers. Like you can pay your bills via crypto by using this sort of third-party platform. You can pay your phone bills. You can pay for Netflix. You can pay for Uber, Grab, like food, transportation, flights, accommodation. You can pay for a lot of things on crypto now, right? Just by holding it in your wallet and then using it when you see fit. And when you make these sort of transactions, no one is ever going to ask you and be like, oh, why are you buying this, right? It's a ridiculous question in my opinion. It's a right, it's not a privilege. Rebuilding a new financial ecosystem, one that is a little bit more fair and overall better for the people as a whole. Because a lot of a lot of what underpins the global economy nowadays is obviously run by central banks and central bankers, and they still adopt the old philosophy based around Keynesian economics, which is really fucking outdated in my opinion, right? And yeah, I mean, if you believe the thesis that all spending is good spending, even if you spend $10 million on funding firearms for some war, I mean, it requires some education. You should definitely go back to school, right? Because that's definitely not a good thing. Yet that is the philosophy and economic theory that underpins a lot of what we like operate in today, right, on a day-to-day basis. So I think crypto, yes, it's a movement. Yes, it's a little bit niche. Yes, it can be seen as a bit kind of outlandish, a bit different, let's say, right? But overall, if this is the direction that the world moves towards, I personally think it's for the better and not for the worse. I think people having more control over their wealth is genuinely a good thing, right? So yeah.
Nice. All right then. To wrap up with the last question, right? As usual, could you give me three names for guest nominations to come on my pod in future?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first recommendation I would like to recommend would be Right Side, i.e., Paolo from Kendall, my good friend. Yeah, I would love to hear Pal. He's very, very smart, very, very knowledgeable. We chatted a lot at Token 2049 Singapore as well as the Bangkok conference recently, and I'm probably going to be meeting him in Taipei in a couple of days as well. So that's cool. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
he's really smart, really knowledgeable, really down to earth, and I think he'll be a fantastic guest for your podcast. I think he would have a lot of value to share with your audience. Second nomination would be Dumbird from Mux Protocol. Reason why is because he's the product kind of manager there, but he also wears a lot of different hats, as in the case of any sort of startup. His background doesn't reside in Web3, so he's not like native Web3. He's more like web. He came from a Web2 SaaS background, I believe. So for him, like Web3 has been a bit of a learning curve. But he's picked up, he's managed to kind of apply a lot of what he's from what he's learned from his previous experience, and added a lot of value to the Mux team.
Mm-hmm.
And through working together with him and alongside his team, we put Mux as the sort of third largest perp dex in terms of trading volume. And as of today, they are top 20 in ranking when it comes to like 24-hour fee generation basically on all on-chain protocols, which I think is a huge accomplishment. It's something that's definitely not easy. It's definitely something that requires a lot of strategy, especially when you're in a space as like a perp space, right? The perp tech space, which is very very fierce, very very competitive, and he's definitely got some innovative strategies when it comes to marketing approaches, when it comes to positioning the brand, which helps establish themselves as to where they are today. So I think he'd be like a fantastic candidate. Um, a third candidate would be Michael from Curvance. So yeah, obviously you asked me to speak a little bit about Curvance, and I gave him my best. Probably wasn't the best explanation that could definitely be made, but hearing from the founders themselves
Mm-hmm.
would definitely make a bigger difference. And more importantly, like hearing about their journey, because this protocol is not like 99% of the protocols that have been released recently, in the sense that they are not a fork of anything. They've been building up their code base over the last 2 years. They've been trying to secure the cap table and their seed round over the last 6 months. They didn't just accept one big check size from a VC. They could have, but they chose to go through sort of the angel investor, strategic investor route. Working with the Polygon Foundation founders, the people from Arbitrum, from Off-Chain Labs, right? They really, put a lot of thought into the protocol, from everything from the development of the code base, from who they choose to audit with and why, how much they choose to spend on marketing at which point and why. And and even from the rate, from the efforts when it comes to raising, right? They're very very selective who they took money from, right? Because they don't need money. They can find money in many places, but they were very selective who they raised from. And there's a lot of these different things that speaks to me as an individual, is what gives me a lot of conviction in their team. And I believe that if they were to come on and share their story, share their worldview, um, and a bit of their philosophy when it comes to building a Web3 business, that might inspire some of your audience to maybe try and do the same, right? Or maybe it might discourage some, because some people might think it's an easy cash grab, when there is really a lot that comes with every protocol, right? And it's not as easy as how people see it as a speculator. There's a lot of things that go behind the operations, behind the scenes. So I think hearing from one of these guys would definitely add a lot of value to your audience as well.
All right, and there we have it, the three nominations from Jiraiya. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on and of course share with us your journey and of course your insights as well. Before we go off, is there anything else that you want to talk about that we might not have mentioned yet?
No, I think we pretty much covered everything. All I want to say is that you've been a fantastic host. I wish you got to speak a little bit more. I appreciate that. I spent a lot of the time talking. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed myself coming on, sharing my thoughts, my opinions. Obviously, none of what I say is financial advice, but everything that comes out of my mouth and comes out of my page as well, in my opinion, is like super authentic. I believe that what I say is genuinely good. Like, I'm not here to just pump my bags, and I mean, I highly doubt that you guys are gonna be able to pump a frigging $2 billion project anyway. But the point is that me, Moose, and all the other people that have come onto this podcast, I believe all of these people are very, very authentic people. I believe Moose is highly selective of who he associates with himself with and who he brings onto these conversations. So don't take these interviews and what comes out from these different people as a grain of salt, but really dig into it, right? Dig into the project that they talk about, dig into their philosophy, and that's how I personally operate as well. Like, I go around the world, I meet a lot of different people every single day, right? At events, at conferences, and hostels, and hotels, on the street, at events, right? When I'm going out snorkeling, right? And these people may have nothing, absolutely nothing to do with Web3. They might know nothing about business, but every single person in the world has something that is valuable to you, whether it's a life lesson, a philosophy, or whatever it is. So really treasure that.
All right, and there we have it, the great closing speech by Jiraiya. Thanks again, Jiraiya, for taking the time, right? Really appreciate you sharing all this with us, and thank you for the kind words, right? So Be sure to check Jiraiya out, right? I'll be linking down his Twitter down in the description down below. And thank you for tuning into this episode. We will see you in the next episode.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
That brings us to the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Before you go, do remember to give us a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button so you never miss a thing. Comment down below what you liked about this episode, who you like me to interview next, or any topics that you want to learn more about. Until next time, this is Moose moving out.